Hey, Grandmasters Mike Amori, how are you? Had a great time watching your games on Sunday. There were some really good ones. There were a lot of games, too, that were lost in time pressure. Please don't let that discourage you because it happens to all of us. What I highly recommend is that you go over your games. Personally, I like to click through them without the computer just to see what my human eye can pick up without having time pressure on me. And then, of course, you can use the computer to check some tactics and things as you progress. Okay, I'm going to pick out a game. It was played between Fred and Leah. And I'm picking it out because it covered several of the themes that we had talked about in classes this last year. And I want to show it to you. So we have a typical two knights defense by Leah, who has the black pieces. Fred, with white, plays d3, avoiding the sharper lines like knight g5 targeting f7. We've all seen how exciting those games can get. So Fred kind of lays back here, but just because he's going to play quietly now does not mean that the game it's going to open up later on. Both players really opened as quickly as possible, as you'll see. Okay, so bishop to c5, typical Italian move, and now the move c3. They call this the quiet Italian game. Notice that Fred has not made a break in the center yet. And by having the pawns on c3 and d3, he's controlling all of these central squares, not letting Leah's knight hop into d4. And that can be very useful, especially when this bishop, if it does, come to g4, pinning the f3 knight. Because you have to be careful with that. With the bishop on g4 combined with the knight jumping into d4, you can have some real issues. But as I mentioned, having the pawn on c3 prevents that. Now, there's a downside to c3. What might it be? So please, if you're watching this on YouTube, you could just always click the pause button and do that often and think about the questions that I'm posing to you. So what could be the downside about having the pawn on c3? And primarily it's you don't have a knight on c3. You can't have both. So by not having the opportunity to put the knight here, you're taking away a little bit of scope from this knight. But Fred is fine with that because he's comfortable with how to maneuver around this. d6, and now backing up the bishop. Does he have to do it on this move? Maybe not, but Fred does not like the idea of this knight coming to a5 at some point and having the opportunity trading this knight for this bishop. So he's actually willing to back it up and then even tuck it in and then later push these pawns, opening up the bishop to the black king. Now, I know that seems like it's a long way away, but just watch. Okay, Leah pins the knight. Fred, knight to d2. So taking this knight makes no sense for Leah because she can just take back with the queen or the knight. So she castles. So far, all been played before, lots of times. And there's Fred's first maneuver. The knight backing up to f1, preventing castling, and at the same time interfering with the rook, which really isn't going to play yet, but it kind of looks bizarre. It's not. It has several points. One, you could challenge the bishop on e3, and if it's taken, you can put the knight on e3, hitting the bishop with an eye on two very nice central squares. That's one idea. The knight can just find its way to g3, like in the game. From g3, notice how it's controlling this f5 square. That's an idea. If black ever plays the move g6 to prevent that idea, then all the dark squares around Leah's king would open. So even though it seems Fred is playing very quietly, he does have ideas. Leah, queen to d7, connecting her rooks, telling Fred, go about your business, which he does. And I really like the way both players handle the opening because they're playing logically. They're putting their pieces on good squares. Fred is aware that his king is not castled, but notice that Leah has not broken the board open. So he can get away with this for now. And here I like her move a lot. The computers, when you go over these games, might suggest something different. As a matter of fact, Leah won a really nice game, I believe in the last round, where she sacrificed a knight on g6, and the computer wanted her to do it on f7. But they're both completely winning. Be very careful not to get hung up on computer evaluation. So here, the computer would look for a different move, but from a human perspective, let's turn the board for a couple of moves. Now, this is from Leah's perspective. So here's her move. Rook f to e8. Again, I like her move. She's guarding the e-pawn, a little overprotection. She has these bishop f7 sacrifices under control, as you can see. So what's the point of rook f to e8? It indicates to me that she might be interested in playing d5 someday. And if that move comes about, you'll see that the rook is guarding the e-pawn, which, if this e-pawn ever moves or takes, that supports a push in the center. So her move, again, while looking kind of harmless, it's not. They're both preparing. Now Fred plays a move that he likes to play, and in this particular position, he probably did not have to retreat the bishop yet. He could have castled. He could have maybe developed the bishop just to see if, I don't know if Leah makes a weakness, but this is the setup that he enjoys playing, and there is a benefit. He's saving time on the clock, which when you're playing a fast time control, sometimes you have to sacrifice finding the best move and replace it with a move that is decent, that saves you time on the clock. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So both players have saved a ton of time. As a matter of fact, here, I can't really move this screen changer right now, but Fred has not used any time at all. He has full 10 minutes and 1 second. He's actually gained a second because of the increment. All right, there's the advantage of knowing your maneuvers. And now Leah plays d5. Her thinking, okay, if you want to keep your king in the middle and you want to retreat a bishop off a diagonal, since I'm completely developed, I'm going to break. And she did. Now Fred knows another idea in this position, and it's the move queen e2. The idea of the move, very simple. Get off the D line, and in case of a capture, which did occur, he can just replace it with the pawn, and now the queen is no longer in position to be traded. This is a setup that he knows very well. If you put this on a computer, the computers will say this position is pretty flat, meaning the important squares are controlled and there are no direct attacks. Notice the pin, but no way to exploit that. You can't add pressure with your queen. You can't add pressure with your knight. Okay. Rook a to d8. Another move I really like. Computers occasionally will kind of go, you had something different. If you go over the game and you don't see a major difference between the moves, try to put words to what it is that you're doing. All right, let's do it for Leah. Let's go back. Pause your video. Why did she play rook d8? What did she accomplish by playing the move? Okay, it simply centralizes the rook and connects to a concept we call bringing in the last piece. All of the minor pieces are working. The rook in the corner wasn't quite in the game, so she centralizes the piece. Fred kicks the bishop, and now Leah has the first decision to make. Well, you always look at every check and capture. Should we capture the knight? From the black perspective here, you can pretty much guarantee that Fred is going to take back with the queen, now giving him the two bishops. You could argue that the center is closed right now, but this bishop not having a partner on the other side could really shine if these light squares open. Not quite sure Leah was into just giving Fred the two bishops like that, so she didn't. So she moves the bishop back. Bishop to d2. Fred's next move is pretty much screaming at us. Did he have another option with the bishop? Sure. Maybe he can play bishop to g5. Try to see if you can get Leah to maybe push a pawn. Make a weakness. That's an idea. But bishop to d2. What is the idea? I'm thinking he wants to castle long. What do you think? Leah, in that position, is asking the simple question, why did my opponent play bishop to d2 and not pin me? It looks like he wants the bishop to shield the d-file so he can castle. So her move, I like. She played the move a6. Again, I like the move because she's playing with an idea. If my opponent castles on the queen side, I'm going to start a pawn storm on that side of the board. And he does. And as soon as he does, Leah had an opportunity to win this pawn. And I'm pretty sure I know why she didn't take it. Because during the classes this year, I showed a game where somebody played a move like this, and we call this the mouse trap at the WCA, where you push a pawn like this and you trap the bishop inside. The problem here is Fred can't mouse trap the bishop because he gets mated in one move. So I'm not quite sure if Leah saw that, but she probably could have gotten away with winning that pawn. But instead she moved her queen off the file, so there are no tricks with this bishop. Fred jumps in, and now Leah has a big decision to make. Move the queen and keep the bishop, or take the bishop and continue her attack. She takes. Take the knight, rather. Takes back. Options. You could play e4. She plays b5. And again, as I keep repeating this over and over, don't ever get upset at yourself for missing something the computer finds. Every single move that both of these players are putting on the board makes sense. They're not grandmasters. But notice Fred's next move, g4. You have the white king on c1, you have the black king on g8, opposite side castling. The first thing that should come to your mind when you see that opposite side castling is to attack your opponent's king, and doing your best not to give in, playing defense when they're attacking you. We always say it's a game of chicken. Who's going to give in first? Leah looks at the move and continues her attack. Fred now has the option to play on the other side of the board. There's a pawn hanging here to the queen. Now, if he takes it, it will be hitting the knight, which means it's not one of those poison pawns that you take, then you get hit with a rook, and the rook penetrates and does some damage up there. Not going to work because you're going to hang a whole knight, and there's just not enough. If you take that, oh, sorry, that would be a pretty bad move, eh? If you take that pawn, what do you have for your knight? We can kick your rook. The king has an escape square. You just don't have enough for the piece. That's why you might be able to take the pawn. But I know Fred too. In his mind, the last thing he wants to do is open a file on this side of the board. So he ignores it. Another option, who's protecting this knight? Nobody. Because you have all these pawns on light squares, maybe you can consider moving this bishop here and attacking and pinning the unprotected knight. But Fred has been playing chess a long time. You could go after the knight. It will be protected, or maybe Leah will sacrifice the exchange, but the bishop in Fred's mind is pointing at the king and protecting his own king. He's not interested in this side of the board. So he pushes g5. And here Leah makes her first mistake. This, my friends, is what we call a sharp position. The board is open. The board is filled with tension. Look at the D file. Look at the pawn tension here. Look at the tension here. Whenever you have a sharp position, we repeat over and over to WCA students, the most important thing to have is your move. Leah makes a mistake here. She plays knight h5. It's a mistake because the knight is such a short range piece that it is miles away from Fred's king. She's thinking it could protect her own king. The problem is, number one, it's loose, and number two, Fred could have continued with the move f6, which would have been a very, very powerful move. A move that he saw, but he saw it a little bit late. If Leah takes that pawn, there are several moves here. You can pause your video. One move would be just put your queen here, attack h7, attack the unprotected knight. You have moves like knight to d4. Look how crazy that is, exposing the queen to this knight. And there's all sorts of stuff coming on here. Do you notice, however, that the move f6, let's turn the board around one more time. If you look at the board and say, what do I do here to get the most for my money? It's a sharp position. No more maneuvering, I have to strike. If you play the move f6, you have a really, really strong attack. What Fred did is he did something similar to what Leah did. He put his knight on the side of the board. This time the knight, however, is close to the enemy king, but it gives Leah a move, which she exploits by taking the pawn. Now f6. The problem with f6 is the bishop goes with check. Rook takes, and in this position, Leah has to give back something. You could even do it this way, because keep in mind, the queen is on the knight. Just take the pawn back, and in this position, if Fred goes in to take everything, you'll have this setup where he is up, or down rather, 2 pawns. Leah has a really good chance of winning this game. What she did on the next move, this is such a cool game, is she makes a losing move that really computers find. She took the rook. Okay, pause your video. Both queens are hanging. White to play and win. Okay, taking the rook. I don't know. I don't think you're gonna make it out. This does queen here, and do the math. Not good for Leah. For Fred rather. What did you find here? How about this? Bishop takes f7 check. What a beautiful move. Beautiful move. What do? If you take the bishop, then the queen takes the knight check. You get out of check and then you lose your queen. The rook will be hanging. There's all sorts of bad stuff that's going to happen. So what do? If you come here, we take the queen with check. Then we take the rook. That's terrible. The only other option would be to put your king here, and Leah has just enough time to take the knight anyway, threatening terrible discovered checks. Fred's going to get mated. So he missed it. And in this position, he took the knight. But Leah found a really cool attack. Rook takes bishop. She played the ending really well. King up, check, queen out, threatening really strong check on a2, up, centralizes the queen, attacking the rook in the corner. He attacks back, but it's too late. Check, check, mate. What a fantastic game. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to be sending stuff out periodically, and we'll be getting those classes back in September. All right? Thank you all for playing. We'll see you on Sunday.